Today's episode of the Cloudcast is sponsored by Datadog. Bring speed and scale to your security organization. Datadog Cloud Security Platform delivers real-time threat detection and continuous configuration audits across applications, hosts, containers, and cloud infrastructure. Built on top of the observability platform, Datadog brings unprecedented integration between security and DevOps aligned to shared organizational goals. As a listener to the Cloudcast, you can sign up for a free 2-week trial to see for yourself how Datadog can elevate your cloud infrastructure security posture by visiting datadog.com/security-cloudcast. Sign up now and receive a free Datadog t-shirt. That's datadog.com/security-cloudcast.
Cloudcast Media presents from the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome back to the Cloudcast. We're coming to you live from our massive Cloudcast studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina, and it is Aaron for Cloud News this week. Got a couple interesting articles, and then we're going to jump straight into our interview. First of all, as we've reported on Cloud News previously a couple times now, there's been a number of tech layoffs in our industry, and so we wanted to report something that was good. And this actually comes from the Software Defined Talk podcast, their Slack channel, a listing of over 500 companies that are hiring right now. So if you go to the link, it's an Airtable list, and it is links, it is sorted, it is categorized. It's a fantastic list. And so if this is of interest and need for you, we certainly hope you will take advantage of this resource. And moving on to our second article, OpenStack. Remember OpenStack? It's still there. And actually was really interesting. I came across this article on the Register that they just not only, we mentioned it before, they got through the entire alphabet. For those that weren't familiar, first OpenStack really started with an A, then a B, then a C, all the way down the line. They got to Z. They got all the way to the end of the alphabet, and they're wrapping back around. So not only did they make it to the end of the alphabet, so congrats on that, but they have 40 million cores in production, according to the 2022 OpenStack user survey. And this is a 60% increase from 2021. And it is now running in over 300 public cloud data centers worldwide. So OpenStack just keeps on ticking along like it always has been. You know, a lot of folks kind of wrote it off over time, but it found its niche and it found its use cases and it found its stride. And so congrats to everyone for momentum in the OpenStack community. And lastly, Cisco. As Cisco, we don't talk about them nearly as much here on the podcast anymore, but Cisco is coming up with a developer event next year, April 5th and 6th. It is a hybrid event, and it is called Cisco Develop. And Cisco Develop for 2023, there is a call for speakers. So I wanted to highlight that because I thought this was an interesting call for papers in our industry. And so anybody out there with DevOps, automation, application deployment, monitoring, all of the usuals that are out there, as well as security. If you're interested in those, certainly go ahead and go to the link in the show notes, and call for papers is open now through December 31st. And so with that, I'm going to wrap up Cloud News of the Week. And coming up after the break, we're going to be talking to Andrew Davidson, SVP of Cloud Products over at MongoDB, about developer data platforms.
Buffering. How annoying. Did you know that 17 out of 20 people stop watching a video because of stalling and rebuffering? Don't let your users click away to a competitor's site. If your business lies on online media, rely on CDN77 to deliver a seamless online experience to your audience. CDN77 is one of the leading global providers of content delivery network services. They power the world's most popular websites and apps, such as Udemy, ESL Gaming, live sports TV, and social media platforms. Aside from their massive and redundant global network, you're going to love their no BS attitude and skilled team of engineers ready to help 24/7. No chatbots, no tickets bouncing around unresolved for days, just people who know your use case and can immediately help you pinpoint and fix the problems. Don't wait until your users run out of patience. Go to cdn77.com/cloudcast and ask for a free trial with no duration or traffic limits. That's cdn77.com/cloudcast. Today's show is sponsored by CloudZero. For software-driven companies focused on growing margins, CloudZero is the only cloud cost intelligence platform that puts engineering in control by connecting technical decisions to business results. By analyzing cloud services like AWS and Snowflake, CloudZero provides real-time cost insights that help you maximize margins. Engineering teams can answer critical questions like, who are my most expensive customers? How much does this specific feature cost our business? What's the cost impact of re-architecting this application? With cost anomaly alerts via Slack, product-specific data views, and granular engineering context that makes it easy to investigate any cost, CloudZero is your complete cloud cost intelligence platform, connecting the dots between high-level trends and individual line items. Join companies like Drift, Rapid7, and SeatGeek by visiting cloudzero.com/cloudcast to get started today. That's cloudzero.com/cloudcast. And we're back, and big weekend here in the United States. Thanksgiving weekend, nice long weekend for everybody. Aaron, how are you, man? And any big plans for the holiday weekend?
Yeah, so doing well, and actually big plans this year. For those that don't know, my daughter goes to college down in Alabama. It is from North Carolina. It is about an 11-hour drive, and we're flying in the grandparents. We're doing Thanksgiving in Alabama, and we're going to the Alabama-Auburn game on Saturday. So actually, it's going to be a really, really busy Thanksgiving this year compared to most years.
Yeah. Well, that's good. Well, stay healthy. A lot of driving, a lot of interacting with people, and a lot of eating. We are, the holiday weekend is one of those, especially Thanksgiving holiday weekend is one where you're kind of interacting and you're mixing a lot of different things together, which sort of loosely ties together what we're going to talk about today, which is we're going to dive into how do we mix together all these different things that developers want to do with applications with all the different ways that we can access data and make that data part of our application platforms. And so really excited to dive into that today with Andrew Davidson, who is SVP of Products at MongoDB. Andrew, welcome to the show. Great to have you on.
Brian, Aaron, thank you so much. So great to be here. And it's going to be hard for me to follow that up, Aaron. I unfortunately have a more lackadaisical weekend planned, but college football, you have me excited when you mentioned it. That sounds great.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite team before we dive into the show?
Well, my favorite team would be my alma mater, so the Cal Bears, but it's been a tough couple of decades for us. You know how it goes.
Yeah. No, I can appreciate that. Well, listen, Andrew, first off, thank you for being on the show. We've had a chance to both work with Mongo as a great sponsor of the show, but also we've done a number of shows here recently with you and the team, and obviously we've known Peter Ulander for a long time. For folks that may not be familiar with you or the kind of the things that you work on at Mongo, give us a little bit about your background, what you focus on, and really what you've been working on these days.
Sure. Yeah. So great to get connected with everybody. I focus on product, mostly product management, but also product marketing and product design. We think of them as very related disciplines at MongoDB. Really for our broader platform, which is centered today in 2022 on MongoDB Atlas. But over the years, I've been at MongoDB over 9.5 years now. Over the years, my focus has certainly shifted. When I first started out, we were very much what I would call a traditional software company, right? We made software that folks would manage for themselves. In fact, back in those days, we were very much still two peas in a pod with AWS. And of course, one of the great reasons we're speaking today together is because AWS reInvent's coming up next week. And, so MongoDB's journey has from the very beginning been intimately tied with AWS. For many years, folks would manage MongoDB as software, self-managed software on top of the IaaS building blocks AWS pioneered. But over the last 6 years, our business has been focused and centered one level of abstraction up in MongoDB Atlas, which is our fully managed service. It's our most widely deployed service. It's where the vast majority of our customers are, the vast majority of our revenue. And Atlas really just represented what I think our customers kind of demanded out of us in partnership with AWS to really give people that ability to manage their data infrastructure at the speed that they could think. And that was such an important thing to marry with what MongoDB had done for the data model, giving developers that document data model so that they could imagine data and the shape of their data as fast as they could think and as fast as they could code. Bringing that experience to the infrastructure layer in Atlas was really just such an important step for us as a company. So I've been very front and center focused on MongoDB Atlas since we launched there. And we've just done so much exciting things in the last 6 years.
And Andrew, so first of all, kudos on Atlas, because I will say this, we've been saying it for years, this move towards above the IaaS layer and towards services, and Atlas has really been pioneering all of this for a long time and has been really kind of a poster child for all of this. But at the same time, when you're looking at managing data, right? Data is such a weird beast at times, right? It's super cheap to create. Anybody can create something, but it's super expensive to move, especially when the cloud gets involved. And it's sometimes complicated to use because there's so many different ways to interact with it depending on the use case. And so I'm sure you spend a lot of time just thinking about data and all of these ramifications. So how do you frame up the challenges of how applications interact with data today?
Great question. In so many ways, this is intimately entwined with our entire kind of core thesis as a company, even going back to the very beginning. We had this feeling, this realization that if you were to look at where developers were spending most of their time, it was fundamentally in wrestling with state or wrestling with data. I mean, the stateful part of software is what is just so fundamentally challenging. And so from the very beginning, MongoDB realized developers are interfacing with this data model that was pioneered decades ago, that was built for a different set of bottleneck in computing. Frankly, actually, I don't know if you've heard this one before, but if you were to go back and kind of review where the relational data model kind of was born out of, it was a time in computing in the 1970s in which the key cost bottleneck in computing was the cost of storage. And you could throw a bunch of people at the problem because storage was so expensive. You had to, keep the machine hungry or keep the machine humming along, if you will, well fed. Whereas if you sort of flash forward to today, I often ask folks, what do you think the key cost bottleneck in computing is today? And I would answer, I believe it's actually developers' minds. In other words, instead of having developers have to conform their data model to the needs of the machine, today, where you can really fly, is if developers can think and code in an object model that is totally natural to how they think in their code and have the database exactly reflect that. And from day one, MongoDB's focus on the document model, that has been in so many ways the core differentiator for us. We've continued to double down on that with the power of secondary indexes and multi-document ACID transactions, unlocking mission-critical use cases. But really, that document idea is the key to moving fast. It's the core to I think answering your question, which isn't to say it's a magic thing that solves all problems, but when you can deal with the most intrinsically challenging part of software developers' life cycle, that is wrestling with state, and give them a more natural, elegant model, the document model, and the power that they need to drive the vast majority of the queries and the vast majority of their applications. And if you look at kind of where we continue to invest today with capabilities that go beyond traditional operational transactional into more parts of the data lifecycle, capabilities like Atlas Search to address the needs of search, and capabilities that allow you to do app-driven analytics and aggregations all within the same system. What that means is you can build the features that make up modern applications, modern software. And if you're a software developer, a builder, you need to build all of those many features. And you can do that without having to leave this developer data platform, without having to go bolt on a bunch of other systems. Time and time again, we saw folks basically struggling with that relational model and augment it with ancillary bolt-on systems, maybe a key value store over here, a search engine over there. And each time they layered in a new service, a new system, they were introducing more brittle ETL to deal with and more surface area to manage and new APIs for their developers to learn. And we thought, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a way to give developers the elegant API that they want, the document model, and to be able to drive the vast majority of workloads behind that operational transactional, search, app-driven analytics, et cetera, for modern application form factors, mobile and devices, multi-region and global, serverless and event-driven, and to be able to do all of that on a secure multi-cloud foundation everywhere in the world. And that has been, so in so many ways, our whole approach. It's liberating, going back to the core of your question, to be able to express that to be able to shape data the way developers think, and to be able to project that into any of 100 regions around the world on the big three hyperscalers.
Yeah. I remember when Atlas first came out, it was unique because, again, it was a software company moving into the cloud, which, in and of itself is its own challenge. You go from, building software to operating software. And a lot of the early value proposition was, look, you don't want to spend your time setting it up. You don't want to spend your time running a database. You want to spend your time building applications. I'm curious, over the last 5, 6, 7 years, as Atlas has matured and Mongo has learned a lot about running multi-instance, multi-cloud, multi-region environments. Like, what are some of the lessons you guys have learned as you moved from being a database and a software company to being a cloud company, in terms of how developers view the platform, how you are able to integrate things? I'm sort of curious about lessons learned through that 5, 6 year journey.
That's a great one as well. I speak to many members of the community, for example, in the SaaS ISV segment, many of whom are Atlas customers, in fact, but we see them in many ways as peers. Others offering B2B software, for example, or to consumers, and the lessons are many. I mean, the journey to becoming a cloud company or becoming a SaaS company, if one's origin is in traditional shrink wrap software or open source software like us, it is a profound transition, and it certainly can't be done overnight. It requires you to take big bets that take time to see fruition, and it requires you to have a really methodical focus on how you're going to do it in a phased manner. And you need to be able to continue to fund that, essentially, by having your traditional software-based business model continue to have its own growth trajectory in parallel. But some of the biggest changes when you move into the SaaS or cloud business model, the biggest one is really pace. Everything moves so much faster, in a good way, but in a way that'll stretch you to your limits, because your customers will come in and be doing a POC and be gone before you even knew they were on your platform. And you'll be thinking to yourself, if only I was there to lend them that helping hand. So it forces you to be that much more obsessed with self-service usability and excellence, and just investing in making the product something that so many people can come in at massive scale and adopt on their own. To give you a frame of reference on the scale we're talking about, MongoDB Atlas today gets 150,000 signups every single month. And it's just, that number is mind-boggling. Speaking of college football, that's more than the largest stadium in the Big House, at University of Michigan can hold. So I think about this stadium full of developers signing up every month. Some of them are just hobbyists building, an application for the first time, but some of those folks are actually building some of the largest workloads in the world. And it's the whole spectrum, everything in between as well. And so we need to be asking ourselves, what can we do to programatize and make, provide all the resources, the guardrails, the automatic index advice, the automatic scaling and performance and auto scaling advice, et cetera, to make it that much more likely that folks will at scale be successful without needing us to hold their hand every step of the way. So that pace and scale element of SaaS, it's just profoundly different than traditional enterprise software. But then another big one is what I'll call essentially trust. And trust is just something where, in a world in which you're giving folks software that they're responsible for running for themselves, the amount that they have to trust you and to really bet their business on you is very, very different than a model in which they are truly building their business on so many levels on top of building blocks you are providing as a service. The amount they have to trust you for the uptime of their business. I think about how just, this weekend, we're coming up on Black Friday, Cyber Monday. So many of our largest customers under the largest demand of the year, the amount that they have to trust that we together are there shoulder to shoulder to make it through these challenging times, that customer obsession. And trust goes beyond that, of course, when you talk about security and kind of what it means to be the stewards of data, powering the back ends of some of the most important environments for these customers. The amount you have to invest there to show that you're ready operationally, pace-wise, security and compliance-wise, and the amount that you have to be willing to show that you're willing to invest in really going deep to help those customers understand how you operate, to be radically transparent with them about every aspect of what you do. All of that endears customers to understand you and understand what they're getting with that relationship with you. And it's very important to kind of never sweep those things under the rug.
Yeah. And Andrew, let me ask you this, because this is kind of a follow-up I've been thinking about. When it comes to the developer side of all of this,
Sure.
when it goes back to like the, pre-services days, if you will, right? And software and setting up software and all of that takes time. And you had the DBA, and the DBA would kind of hand things off to the developers, and everything would kind of work hand in hand. But, when you talk about offering everything as a service and everything going super fast and 150,000, per month kind of turnover at times. So if you're a developer today, that relationship with the underlying data and the database access model and everything you need to make that a persistent application, is all of that kind of like the lines blurring there, or is it even going away to some extent? Like, how can you achieve that level of velocity?
Yeah, that's a good point. That, one way to think about it is we're moving to a model in which, to use the classic term, the two pizza team, the self-service, agile, relatively small app dev team, the builder, if you will, we're moving to a model in which that builder team is somewhat self-sufficient. It is able to move at its own pace. It is able to own its own infrastructure in many senses, and is able to kind of do all of that while continuing to do its main job, which is to build some amazing software, some amazing application, some amazing feature, whatever you want to call it. So the question is, how is that possible while also essentially taking on worrying about all of those layers of the stack, including the database? And I would answer that the only way that's possible is if everyone's moving up levels of abstraction over time, and the plumbing is no longer where anyone has to worry or focus. That's where moving to a declarative model where I can instantaneously describe a database cluster anywhere in the world at any level of scale and just get it immediately and start using it as a magic endpoint in the cloud for my application. And being able to spin that up, tear it down, spin that up, tear it down, whether part of a CI/CD pipeline or a staging environment or a production environment, being able to weave all that together, whether through a beautiful user interface or through an infrastructure as code like Terraform or a CLI, the ability to do all of that, to think at the level of sort of, instead of thinking about like a database and optimizing that database, instead think at the level of spinning up large numbers of environments to power all the backends of my microservices. Well, that does kind of require you to know more, but you don't have to have as much depth in all of the different layers, because you're not worrying about so many things you might have had to worry about in the past. You're not having to worry anymore about, patching an operating system or provisioning of a VM or, all these lower level kind of building blocks. You're not worrying as much about the network configuration because it's managed for you. You're just managing how you're connecting to the database, for example. And all of that allows, you as the two pizza team to not just be moving at your own pace, which is what you love as a two pizza team, but if you take a big step back, particularly in a larger company, what that means is that you could have dozens to hundreds of these two pizza teams, and they can all be concurrently moving at their own pace, doing their own thing. But a platform team that's focused on governing all of them can now, basically look at the model and think, you know what, this is actually a model that I love, because all these teams get to move fast. That's what I want, and that's what they want. But I, as a platform governance team, am happy because none of these folks can shoot themselves in the foot. They're all operating within this abstraction that doesn't let them disable TLS network encryption over the wire, because Atlas would never allow them to do that. Why would it? Why let them shoot themselves in the foot that way? So you kind of have this best of both worlds where a platform team can be happy that they can easily set the governance standards for everyone else to follow, but everyone else gets to feel like they have a speedboat pace at which they can operate with total self-service agility. And while that still requires the mindset of a DBA, it requires thinking about indexing and data modeling. Instead of that being something that you toss over a fence to someone else, it's something that software engineers need to have today within the two pizza team. And we think that because state and indexing are so fundamentally intrinsic to the nature of successful software, that's a very reasonable mindset to maintain. And we're seeing this shift where DBAs increasingly are joining the two pizza teams and moving away from a model of sort of central toss over the fence operations into platform engineering, SRE, and each team having its own embedded talent.
Yeah. the Atlas platform has evolved over the years, right? Originally it was very much the classic MongoDB document database. Over the years, whether it's search or analytics or other things have sort of come into the platform. Databases are always an interesting thing because you have sort of the CAP theorem trade-off of like performance versus capacity versus availability. How have you guys sort of managed through that in a way that you can keep the simplicity that people have always loved about MongoDB, that developers loved, but adding these other capabilities that you need for applications? You're trying to expand what it can do. You're trying to create better user experience. But like, how have you guys worked through this ability to keep simplicity and speed at the forefront, but also be adding these other capabilities that aren't a document database, but they can be equally as important?
Yeah, great one. I mean, and it's absolutely, we sort of recognize that we live and die on elegantly integrating all these capabilities in so that they just feel like a natural expansion of this document endpoint. In other words, when you take advantage of Atlas Search, rather than it feeling like you're using some other engine, it's something that's part of MongoDB's regular query language. It's part of our aggregation pipeline, the $search operator, and that gives you the full power to bring the search engine on the back end that powers Atlas Search, which is based on Lucene, one of the most popular libraries that power search all over the world. And so, the way we're able to kind of make that something that respects the consistency or mission criticality requirements that our customers demand, which is, I think, the core of your question, is well, I would say, first of all, there's architecturally, how do we do it? But then secondly, how can we help our customers understand it? And that's another important related part. Yep. And I would say the way we do that is, in some sense, we have an architecture that's easy to understand. At its core, it takes advantage of MongoDB's approach to high availability, which is called replica sets, which basically involve 3 nodes, typically spread across availability zones in a region or multiple regions, your choice. And these replica sets, they take advantage of a raft-like consensus algorithm to elect a primary where writes go inside of that replica set. And this little concept, apologies for kind of going deep into the nerdy distributed system.
No, it's great. It's great.
Yeah. This concept becomes quite profoundly important because we live in a time in which, with hyperscaler building blocks, you can 9 times out of 10 prefer to bet for strong consistency than to optimize for the chance of losing 2/3 of your database cluster. In other words, it's so profoundly unlikely that you lose 2/3 that you'd rather give up the write availability in the event that you do, but preserve consistency the rest of the time. So answering your question about the CAP theorem, MongoDB, you could think of it as essentially optimizing for CP. And we think that any mission critical oriented database in 2022 will land on that same approach, because hyperscaler building blocks make it so that you can be so confident that it's extremely unlikely that you lose the majority quorum in a replica set. But replica sets are just a kind of an easy to understand important building block on which we build up from there. Our scalability story in MongoDB is anchored on, yes, you can vertically scale, but it's very much anchored on horizontal scale, which we call sharding. And the way sharding works is essentially you're adding in more and more replica sets. Each of them is called a shard over time. And the advantage of that is long-term linear scale out. Maybe every month you add a shard as you get a new 100,000 users or similar. Whereas vertical scale is great if you want to scale up temporarily for, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, just for a peak event. You can mix and match these two models. But the key point is that with sharded clusters, you get the availability benefits that I just described at the shard level. You're just taking advantage of a bunch of them. And so this easy to understand model of replica sets, which are wrapped around by our shards in sharded clusters, this allows for a very simple, easy to understand consistency first model for mission critical applications in 2022 in a distributed system in the cloud. And when we add in capabilities like search and other capabilities, we always start from that profound baseline. It must have a similar model of high availability. It's fair to say that when it comes to sort of transactional consistency, we think of search a little bit differently than we would the OLTP parts of our database. And that's partially because we look at search through the lens of, where most customers think of it. Most customers think of search as a bolt-on, entirely different system, which has such a profoundly inconsistent experience that our thinking is if you can bring it in to have near consistency in line with the database, that's a game changer compared to the competition.
Yeah, that's perfect. And thank you for that. This is great details. And I think what we'll do is we'll kind of ask you one last question here from a time standpoint. And we always like to, and you already mentioned the, Black Friday, Cyber Monday kind of things, but what are some examples of how companies and really end developers, how do they think differently about these new applications as you're kind of building out data platforms, and what kind of new applications and new approaches are you seeing these days?
Yeah, I mean, it really is amazing to see the full spectrum, right? I mean, if I were to look across the ways folks are building applications on Atlas today, you have everything from the MERN stack, the kind of classic Node.js front-end developer community, all the way to the traditional enterprise folks with Java and .NET, and you have the newest, most exciting application in the world, like think some big exciting NFT platform or a crypto bank, all the way to the most traditional banking and government use cases you can imagine. A great example that I like to mention is what Toyota Financial Services has been doing. They take advantage of Atlas and Atlas Search to really uniquely innovate in the financial services that make it possible, of course, for all of us to buy cars. Another great example of a customer that's, that I think all of us know and love is Intuit. This is one of the leaders in automated compliance platforms and tax management. Many of us certainly powering every small business with QuickBooks and TurboTax. But I think of what Intuit is doing, they're recognizing that as a software companies that, really know how to operate as true software companies, they have to be operating in this way where microservice teams can move at their own pace, et cetera. And, what I love is that we see these born in the cloud type companies like a Canva, say, that, is building this incredible design SaaS experience. They, of course, are starting on MongoDB. But then you look at, a classic company that's been around for decades that's doing some of the most innovative hardware in the world, like Volvo out of Sweden. They're also recognizing the importance of modernizing how they think about building software, of taking advantage of what these born in the cloud digital native type companies are able to do, operating with that speedboat mentality. So we really see the full spectrum. It's great to see that.
Yeah, no, those are, and again, the stories are, it's like you said, the beauty of what you guys are doing in the cloud is it lets companies start thinking really differently about how to scale, about, experimenting, about trying new things, partnering, and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, a lot of powerful stuff. Next week, as you mentioned, reInvent, folks are going to be listening to this, the Wednesday before reInvent. What are you looking forward to at reInvent, or what types of things might you find if you come by the Mongo booth?
The MongoDB will have just an enormous presence at AWS reInvent. We consider it one of our marquee events. We love the partnership with AWS. We love the event. It's for those who haven't been before, it's such a wonderful way to just get exposed to the whole ecosystem, the level of energy and dynamism and how much is going in. It's always exciting to watch the announcements from everybody involved. If you come out to our very large booth, you'll be able to meet plenty of our people. And it's just so wonderful to hear the stories of folks, whether they're using MongoDB for the first time or thinking about launching some massive new capability or maybe migrating to the cloud. We're here to help guide you on any of the above. We take a very personable approach at the event. I'll say as well that, if there's anything I really, really respect, there's two things actually that I have a profound respect for AWS over. The first is just the incredible scale and quality and sophistication of their building blocks, their offerings. As much as we, love our relationship with the other two as well, I would say our relationship with AWS is the oldest, and it is one that I certainly value enormously. So much respect for the way they build. We've taken great inspiration from it. But I also, the second thing with AWS is that incredible customer centricity. We, again, take great inspiration from that. We try and maintain shoulder to shoulder with AWS that incredible way to have a three-way relationship with our customers so that anyone who wants to build modern applications, move fast with a modern developer data platform on AWS, MongoDB Atlas is just the best possible solution. And we're here to, with our partners at AWS, help guide all of you on your decisions as you think about pros and cons, different architectures, different models, as you build your next big thing.
Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. Andrew, thank you so much for the time today. It's like we said, it's been fun watching the evolution of Atlas over the last number of years. So it's been fun watching the transformation of MongoDB from a company that was robust in software and now being kind of one of the poster childs for how to evolve into the cloud. And appreciate you digging into kind of how it's built and the way you think about it. So Aaron, any last thoughts before you take us home, other than hopefully everybody travels safe over the holiday weekend, and whether you're watching Alabama or you're watching Cal or anywhere in between with college football, hope you enjoy it. But Aaron, you want to wrap it up and take us home?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, everyone, thank you so much for listening. We really, really appreciate it. And if you enjoy the show, please tell a friend, or if you can leave a review wherever you get your podcast, please consider doing that as well. And as Brian mentioned, everyone, thank you for listening. We're extremely thankful. We're extremely grateful for everyone. And as we all continue on this journey to kind of learn together, we certainly thank everyone out there for that. And so that is it for this week, and we will talk to everyone next week.
Thank you for listening to The Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more shows, show notes, videos, and everything social media.